My task really is just to look at the overview of what our legal framework looks like and whether it actually can support this new venture, or whether we need to establish or create new laws in order to cater for the intricacies of this very specialized industry. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but it seems there might be difficulties, so I'm just going to go ahead. In terms of our law, we have got sources of law, of which the Constitution is obviously the supreme law. The Constitution was created in order to deal with the atrocities of our past, of our historical past, and to provide an opportunity for our community members to become part of decision-making in terms of their natural resources, in terms of the land, in terms of the products that come from these natural resources. So as a starting point, I think that is very important when we do decide to either make law or whether we decide to amend laws, that would be the basis that we understand why we are doing this and how to go about it. The second source of law would be our Act of Parliament. Now, the Constitution makes provision for this, and Parliament creates acts that basically give us or support the principles and the values that are enshrined in the Constitution, which means it cannot go against the values of the Constitution, otherwise it's unconstitutional. We also have international instruments. Article 144 of our Constitution makes the instruments that we sign and ratify, international instruments, part of our domestic laws. But the problem with implementation has always been there, because international laws do not necessarily sync with the current laws that are applicable, so we've already got a gap. And then we've also got common law. Way back, Roman Dutch law has made a big impact on how we regulate our legal framework. And then we also have policies, and I think one of the speakers will be speaking about policies. They are not necessarily binding, but they give effect, or they help us implement the laws that are in place. So when we talk about green hydrogen, what are the things that come to mind? We know that it's natural resources that are used. We know that it's our natural resources, as well as that it's environmental. It's got an impact on the environment, specifically in light of reducing the carbon emissions in the atmosphere. We are now dealing with producing hydrogen as an energy. So we know, as the previous speakers have indicated, that there is a whole process that needs to take place even before we can produce the energy, before we can have the substance in order to use as an energy fuel. In the picture you'll see, we need, in terms of the Namibian scenario, we need ocean water. In other words, the laws regulating marine resources needs to come into play. We need to extract the water, the salt. What are we doing with the salt? That needs to be regulated. Are we plowing it back into the sea? What are the effects? That needs to be regulated. Are we going to use it as research? That needs to be regulated. Then we need to get pipes to transport the water, clean water, to a place where electrolysis can take place, where they further distract or take apart the molecules of water into hydrogen and oxygen. We need human labor to get those pipes. We need import-export rules to regulate the materials that we're going to use, the building. We need roads, specifically designed for the vehicles. We need to look at the emission of gases of those vehicles. We need to see how that affects the environment. So it all goes into place. And believe me, Namibia has got many laws. We have got laws that deals with the atmosphere. It's 1976. And we've got laws dealing with water, 1954. And I can continue. So inevitably, the laws that are still in place way before apartheid cannot be considered as applicable to the green hydrogen scenario, because green hydrogen was not even, it wasn't even as full. We also have new laws. Some of our acts have been passed after independence, such as the Petroleum and Energy Act. And you'd think the term energy would include something like green hydrogen, because at the end of the day it's green energy. But it doesn't. It doesn't fall within that definition. So it doesn't apply. And so we can continue on and on and on. And at the end of the day, we know that domestically we don't have the necessary laws to regulate this project, or to regulate this, this project. Namibia has a number of laws. I've indicated there some of the laws. And the most important one, obviously, that could possibly be of support or of relevance would be the Environmental Management Act. Now, the Act was enacted for the purpose of regulating the environment. Fine. So we look at activities that take place that have an effect on the environment, which is going to happen because we're going to put all these infrastructures in place and it's going to have an effect on the environment. But when it comes to regulating these activities, what does the regulation do? It refers us back to the old Act. So blah, there you go. No relevance to what we want to do. The question now is, are we going to create a law specifically in relation to this green hydrogen production as an energy source? Or are we going to use the old laws and ask for an amendment? Maybe both, since some effects only come after, the whole process. Never mind about that. We still need to consider the legislation. And we all know that in Namibia, passing the law is not going to happen overnight. It's a good thing we have political support, but there is a process, and it's a democratic process. And it also requires the input from the public. And I want to pause here because that is a very important, very crucial area, because we want the buy-in, not just from people here. We can't preach to the converted. We need to convert the people out there that expect a different kind of approach, which means to include them. Because previously, with the oil drilling and the mining, they've never really had a voice to be a part of the resources that are theirs, because resources are ultimately held in trust for the benefit of the Namibian people. And this is what the Constitution came to do. It came to give a voice to the local people who should benefit from the natural resources. So if we want to do things right, we might as well do it right from the start. We might as well get the input from the community in terms of how they wish to regulate certain aspects, such as investments, where the money goes, transparency, accountability, who is held accountable. Is it only the proponent, or does government share some liability in terms of regulating? I can speak from personal experience. We've got an Environmental Management Act that requires you to apply for an environmental clearance certificate when you start, with activities that have an environmental impact. And it appears that we've got the stick-of-the-box approach in terms of the requirements that has been taken by our officials in terms of not raising or not dealing with the serious concerns of the impact on the environment raised by third parties, interested parties, people that are directly affected. So are we going to take the same approach? We've heard now that in terms of regulating, that we cannot be too rigid. It's a flexible process. It's a process that develops. And because this is a new concept, we must be flexible. Can we afford that flexibility in terms of the size of Namibia, the sensitive biodiversity, if something should go wrong, and the fact that regulation is not in place to keep people accountable for not doing what they're supposed to do? So when we do design framework, it would be utmost important that we deal with clear and concise regulations that people understand, drafted, who it should benefit, and how it should benefit those people. When we also look at the legislation, obviously we're going to need experts that have already been involved in the green hydrogen production, legal experts, but we will also need local experts that deal with the community, that deal with the commercial side, that deal with private and public entities. And together that team needs to deal with the various aspects, bearing in mind that the fundamental reason we are doing this is for the benefit of this country's people. And I say this because our Constitution, remember I said the Constitution is our supreme law. In Article 95 is the only place that it mentions the environment and our maintaining the maintenance of the environment, sustainable development. And it specifically refers there that it is in order to support the welfare of the Namibian people. By granting them equal opportunities, we've heard the beautiful story of 90% employment, education, research skills, specialized skills. We've heard about the benefits of the electricity going out, the excess water being given to the communities. And it's all beautiful and well, but in our regulatory framework, we actually need to be a little bit more specific. The management framework. And if things don't go the way they should, transparency. Speak to the nation. Tell them. And they also need to make a decision knowing the harms. We need to know what the harms are. If the previous speaker says that our regulatory framework is not rigid, that it's developing, and she's also in the same line saying, but hydrogen, which by the way is an indirect GHG, greenhouse gas, and it indirectly affects, but the effect is even worse. They should know this, because at the end of the day, not only do they give the right to benefit, they're also giving the guarantee that they're willing to take the risk. So, in closing, I would say that whatever we decide and however we're going to roll, get the communities involved and be open and be transparent.